p.m., Suge Knight and Tupac Shakur leave the house, and they have plans to go to Club 662, where they're going to celebrate the rest of the night at.
Sitting here with Alonso. He's joining us from Los Angeles, and we're very excited to have him today. He's our first guest on our new podcast, and we're going to be talking to him and getting more of his background, and let's get into it, basically.
Thanks for having me, Angee.
Oh, you're welcome.
I'm actually honored to be your first guest.
Oh my God, that is amazing. I love hearing that.
And I don't like doing interviews either.
I heard.
But I'll do the independent media more than I do mainstream. In fact, I turn mainstream media down all the time. You know, big names too.
Yeah, and I appreciate that so much.
Yeah.
We're looking forward to just learning more about your background. I did some research on you, and you're the founder of streetgangs.com. There's so much video about this guy online. You've done so much research, and I just wanted to ask you really what started that interest for you?
Man, that interest goes back to my early childhood days in New York, growing up with my family there, and my family grew up in the streets.
Okay.
They grew up in the Bronx. They grew up in the streets of Puerto Rico. So naturally, my environment was very street-oriented from a very young age. In fact, my uncle started a gang in New York City in the 1950s called the Puerto Rican Tigers.
Wow.
And then my dad also ran with a group. See, they didn't really call them gangs back then. They were just clubs. But, law enforcement put the gang label on most of these guys.
Okay.
But, just growing up around that environment, I've always been kind of interested and fascinated by it. So when I got to college, I figured out that was something that I could study. So I started studying it.
That is amazing. So that's an actual, degree?
Well, no, it wasn't a degree, but there were actually courses. Here's what really blew my mind. When I got to USC, I was just majoring in some major that I wasn't really interested in. And someone knew I was really into street gangs and, mapping them and writing about them. So this guy said, "Are you taking Professor Klein's class on street gangs?" And I was like, "What? There's a class here on street gangs? You gotta be kidding me." So I went to Professor Klein and confirmed that he taught a gang class. In fact, I later learned that he's one of the top experts in the world on gangs. But then in that same semester, someone said, "Did you take James Diego Vigil's class in anthropology on street gangs?" And then it just blew my mind away that there were courses on gangs. So I went to both of these professors, and they eventually became my mentors while I was an undergraduate at USC.
Yeah, and I saw that you do a lot of consulting. And how do you get qualified to do that? I know your official title is an adjunct professor. Can you explain a little bit what that means? I didn't know what that meant. I mean, maybe I haven't heard that word before. But.
Well, first of all, to be qualified to testify in court and to consult these cases, you just got to have, there's different paths to it. My path was through academia, through getting education, researching, publishing. But most experts have higher degrees and they specialize on a particular field. In the criminal court system, they have experts for psychology, ballistics, witness experts. There's all kind of, and then they have a category for gang experts. So just basically through all the work that I've been doing at the university over the years, and the degrees that I've earned, I guess makes me eligible. Although I'm kind of disappointed that the bar is very high to be an expert in the court system, because there are some people that work in nonprofits, they work with grassroots organizations that are equally qualified to be expert, but they don't have the degrees, they haven't done the academic research. So that's pretty much my path towards that. And then just, adjunct professor just means you're kind of like a part-time, and while I'm working on my final degree, and then I go from being a part-time to a full-time. So that's what I'm doing now.
Yeah, that's amazing. When I first saw you on the Tupac documentary, I noticed that you are a professor at Cal State, and so we're here close to Long Beach in Westminster, but that's what really drew my attention to you because, Cal State is so prevalent in Long Beach. And for him to be on this major show and documentary and actually be from somewhere local was like, oh my God, I wonder if I can talk to this guy. So that's what encouraged me to reach out to him. And I did research him and I found him on LinkedIn, and I remember trying to think of the exact right thing to say because, you only get that one shot, and if they decide they don't like your profile, then you're done. You're never going to talk to them.
No, that's not the way it works.
I remember I kept it really short and simple. And I think I was like, I work with people from Cal State. I'd love to talk to you.
Well, I appreciate you reaching out. I'm always grateful that there's people out there that want to talk to me about, my research and about street gangs and things of that sort, because, it's just a little tiny corner in the world that I'm in. And it's always, I'm always grateful that people want to, interview me or talk to me. And so most of the time, there's a few people in media that I always deal with because I know their work. The LA Weekly I deal with on a regular basis, and a few other local publications. So I'm grateful for that, even for you reaching out.
Thank you, I appreciate it. So you run streetgangs.com, and tell us about when you started that. It was more than 10 years ago, right?
More than 20 years ago,
wow.
Actually.
Oh my God.
I know.
This guy was on it when the internet really was just starting.
I was fortunate to be a student at the university when the internet started. If I wasn't at USC...
Similar to my background, I was in education right when internet took off.
When I was a freshman, I knew nothing about email. I knew nothing about the internet. I knew nothing about the World Wide Web, as they called it back then. But by the time I was a senior, everything had changed from my freshman year to my senior year. And by the time I was a senior, there was the web, there was websites, there were chat rooms, there were discussions areas, a little different than it is today. But yeah, in 1995, that's when I started the website. I started it on the USC server. It didn't even have the name streetgangs.com. It was just, at USC, every student had the ability to create a website. So it would be usc.edu and then your name / whatever name they gave you. So I dumped a bunch of gang files under that folder and created the first website on gangs. And it was an assignment that I had as a senior.
Wow.
There was a professor that talked about the internet, talked about how it was going to revolutionize the world.
Wow.
And we didn't know what he was talking about. It was like sitting in a foreign language class that you didn't even understand that language.
Kind of like today's Bitcoin.
Yeah, I'm still trying to figure that out. But we had an assignment. It was very simple. Create a website on something that you're passionate about. So that kind of was the very early stages of streetgangs.com. And then 3 years later, I bought the domain name streetgangs.com in 1998.
Yeah, I checked out your website, and you have so much content on there. And I think I watched an interview where you were talking about how it grew. It just has grown just because of the years of research that you put into it, and how you're getting contacts from all over the world. I saw one of your interviews that somebody from Scandinavia emailed you to ask how to start a gang. So
I get crazy.
You tell him this is for informational purposes and not to apply this at home.
Most of the time,
don't try this at home.
I get so many emails that most of the time I have no way to even respond to some of these ridiculous questions. And I think back then that was the early stages of trolls and people acting foolish, because I don't know how serious some of these people are on the other side of the keyboard. But yeah, I get questions like that. How can I start a gang where I live? Or can I come to LA and join a gang? That's another one. And I think maybe some of these kids are really fascinated with gang culture because the media, actually there are different ways that the gang culture is presented to people depending on where you're at in the world. Here in LA, you watch the news, it's presented as a very, a predatory culture that's involved in lots of violence. But also through music, it's presented in a different way. You have famous rappers that present gang culture. So there's probably kids fascinated by it in different parts of the world, and they want to meet gang members because Snoop Dogg, The Game, all these guys are successful. They're millionaires. They're doing well. So that's a different side of gang culture that not a lot of people get to reach that Snoop Dogg level. But of course, that's what the kids are looking at, and I think a lot of those questions are sort of generated by that sort of allure of gang culture. But of course, I never invited a kid to come to LA and teach them how to join a gang.
Yeah.
I think that'd be crazy, right?
Yeah. We actually have 6 degrees of separation, which is crazy. I didn't even realize when I reached out to him, I had already been given content last year from The Game through his A&E documentary, Streets of Compton.
Which I was also in that one.
And so I actually had photos of him already on my website, and then I saw his face again, and I'm like, oh my God, that's the guy. So you're always working with A&E, it seems like.
I've had a relationship with A&E for over 10 years. It's I actually had my own show on A&E, yeah, but it never aired.
Okay.
And I was so disappointed about it because I put so much work and effort. They even sent me the emails that it's gonna air and it's got green lit and we're gonna do this and that. So I was kind of excited about it, but it never aired. But I still maintain that relationship with them on different projects. And I think that eventually at some point that original show we'll revisit that project, and whether it's A&E or another network.
Netflix.
Yeah, you know what?
All those projects end up on Netflix.
A lot of people have been talking to me about Netflix and then also Showtime. The business is really, I learned a lesson when I worked on that show. This was maybe 9 years ago, that it's not true until it actually is at that point of completion. You can get an email saying we're doing the show. You can get a message from the producer saying we want 9 episodes. They'll give you the quote unquote green lights, but then something happens, something that you don't even know, that's out of your control. But A&E's been good to me over the years.
So what sort of show was that?
It was actually a show about gang members, where I actually interviewed 17 different gang members. And we were going to take you through their lives.
In Los Angeles?
All in LA.
Okay.
All in LA. All kind of gang members. I had a couple Latinos, I had blacks, I had some Cambodians, and they were going to bring it down to maybe 5 or 6 of the most interesting characters. Wow. And then we were going to take you through their lives over maybe 10 episodes of what they're doing, what's going on, going to jail, getting arrested, and we had all this crazy footage.
Wow, that sounds like so much drama.
And then here's the thing, we shot all of the episodes. We shot, not all the episodes, we shot a pilot. And then A&E said, we love it, but we want to change it a little bit. And of course, you always got to make the changes the network wants. And they said, we want Alex to be actually in it. Because I was just producing and directing and I wasn't in it at all. So then we had to reshoot it with me in it, with the same guys, trying to link everything together, did all of that.
And these are like real gang members.
Real gang members.
So how did you approach them when you told them? How did they take it when you said we have to do reshoots?
Oh, they didn't mind the reshoots. The hard part was getting them to shoot in the first place. Getting 17 guys to agree 9 years ago when my channel wasn't as popular. 9 years ago. Now it's easy. I could just say, hey, my name's Alex Alonso. Hey, I know who you are, But 9 years ago, people didn't really know me as well. So the hard part was to get, 17 people on board and find them. The reshoots weren't a problem, but it was, dealing with the network, dealing with executives, you never know what's going to happen.
That's amazing. And shout out to A&E for just going there. Because I don't think any other network would, maybe, but they seem to be the ones that are always bringing that like raw, authentic, real life, drama. Definitely.
Networks go through different sort of phases. Sometimes they become very conservative and they get a little more liberal. Sometimes they go very white middle class and they kind of go urban. So they kind of shift. And there have been times when A&E, you didn't see any sort of urban programming on A&E, so they've been up and down. But there are a lot of other networks like FX and Netflix, HBO, Showtime, that are all interested in urban programming. So all you guys out there that are, artists and trying to create an idea, concept, or show, right now is the time to do it.
Nice. That's some great advice right there. So let's talk about basically what was your or today, in today's world, as street gangs is just growing and growing and growing, what would you really want people to take away from it when they go and visit that site? Because there's so much content on there.
Well, I think the number one message that I'm trying to put out to the people is that gang members are regular people like everyone else. The media has demonized gang members. Law enforcement has demonized gang members.
Yeah.
And, I meet gang members almost every day. Literally. Every week I'm meeting dozens of gang members.
Wow.
And most of them want a better life. Most of them want to improve their family's life. They want to get out of the ghetto. They want to earn money. They have the same passions and desires that everyone else does. And unfortunately, if you ask the average American about gang members, they're going to give you like everything negative, So in my interviews and in the videos and the episodes, I hope people can see that, wow, this guy looks cool. This guy actually sounds like I could hang out with him. And when I go through the comments, I get that. Oh, I like this guy. He's a cool guy. I want to meet him. I'll get messages saying, hey, can you link me with that guy? So that's pretty much the main message that I'm trying to get out there is, let people go through different trials and tribulations when you're born in certain areas and certain environments. And then when your family dynamics are a certain way and you have all the stars aligned, you're going to end up in a gang. And that's out of the control. And most of the time, that's out of the control of the person that joins the gang. A lot of times they say, well, he chose it. And that's true. He chose it, but he chose it out of limited choices in the first place.
Definitely.
So that's what I'm trying to, that's at least one thing that I'm trying to communicate to the public.
So do you think that there should be more programs to help them, or how would they even be able to change their lifestyle that they're in if they're limited on options?
Well, it takes the effort of the local and state government to do it. And unfortunately, when they allocate their budgets, most of it goes towards suppression of gangs, arresting and put them in prison. Mm-hmm. And very little bit of the budget goes to prevention and intervention. Now, the government will say, we believe in intervention. They'll say, we believe in prevention. Law enforcement, if you ever get Charlie Beck or any other high-ranking law enforcement officer to sit on this couch with you, they will tell you prevention and intervention is important. But here's what they won't tell you. We don't really spend a whole lot of money on it. Mm-hmm. So that's the problem. Maybe 90% of the resources go towards suppression, meaning patrols, gang units, arrests, trials, and sending them to prison.
Yeah, definitely. So I know you said, going back to your childhood, that it was in your life, but you had that drive, I guess, to do other things. You didn't get stuck in that life. Right? Never got stuck in the life. Never really. I mean, I knew that I had goals at a young. When I was 12 or 13. No, yeah, I was 12. I knew I wanted to go to USC. I had made that decision when I was 12. Were you living in New York?
No, I was already in Los Angeles. I moved to Los Angeles right around that time.
Okay.
And I went to a football game at USC when I was 12 from a friend's mother that took me there. And she actually worked and went to school there. Wow. And I was just amazed, like, I'm on this campus. I'd never been on a college campus in my life at that point. Yeah. And right now, that's why I always take my kids to college campuses whenever we travel, because I had never been to one until I was 12. Wow. So, and USC was very close to where I lived. So I was like, wow, I would love to come to this university one day.
That's awesome.
So it took me about 9 years to figure it out. Mm-hmm. I started late. I was a 21-year-old freshman. I wasn't the typical 18-year-old freshman. So it took me about 9 years, to get to SC from that point. And it took me about three and a half years after I graduated from high school, because I didn't have the grades for USC. originally, and that's very important.
But you got in.
I got in, but I had to work extra hard, and that's why it's so important for all the young people out there that you have to perform at your best in high school on that SAT and on your grades to get into the university you want to go to. If not, you're gonna have, challenges in front of you.
Oh man, I can relate to that. I didn't go to any major college, but I did get a small degree from community college. But
you could always transfer and get your bachelor's too, right?
I could, and when people talk, I'm always I admire them. I don't even know the word for that because that just seems like such a big feat. Bachelor, like to me, it's just years and years of college.
I thought it was going to be the hardest thing I ever did.
Yeah.
Before I did it, but it became easy. It became simple, and then I went out and got a master's degree. I thought that was going to be hard, but
so you have a master's degree?
Yeah, I have a master's degree, and I thought that was going to be difficult. And then I went and joined into a doctoral program,
Oh my goodness.
which I'm hoping to complete soon. And I took the hardest exam that I ever took in my life was my PhD qualifying exams, which was a 2-week examination basically of questions and answers.
Wow.
You get 2 weeks to answer it, and it's
Was that through USC still?
yeah, everything's through USC, and I passed those qualifying exams, and that is by far the hardest exam that I ever had to complete. And I know a lot of other PhD students at different universities, every exam is different. They gave me a 2-week exam where some universities give you maybe a 3-day exam or a 1-week exam. You don't hear about 2-week exams too often. But I took it and I was still finishing the exam an hour before it was due. I'm still typing a 2-week exam an hour before it's due, but I passed it. And when you look back at the bachelor's degree now, it's a piece of cake. But but when you're on that path to the bachelor's degree, you're like, wow, I don't know if I can do this. And I'm the first one to graduate in my family too from a 4-year university.
That is so awesome. What's going on in your work life right now? I know you said you are assisting at Cal State. Do you have any future projects that you're working on? Anything in the mix? Any new shows?
Yeah, I have a few things. I'm teaching a couple courses right now. One of my classes is street gangs. That's what it's called.
Oh wow! So now you're the teacher.
Yes.
See, the student becomes the teacher.
That's crazy
And
because
the best way to learn is to teach.
I was thinking that not too long ago that I'm teaching a class on street gangs now at a university.
Is it at Cal State?
It's at Cal State Long Beach, and I think that the students enjoy the class, so I try to make it as fun and entertaining as possible. So I'm teaching, and then I'm working on a couple of projects. I'm trying to develop a script that's based around LA gang culture for Netflix, actually, and we'll see how that works out. And then, of course, I'm always trying to grow my channel on my website, do more interviews, meet more people, tell more stories. I want to be more consistent, uploading like 2-3 videos a week, and just really grow the channel and get these people's stories out to the world as effectively as I can.
So, has there been any story that you've talked to or any gang member that just really sticks out with you that, maybe you feel like more connected to him or her? Do you meet a lot of female?
I wish I did more female interviews, and it's not my fault that there's only a few of them on the platform, but I really try. And, women in gangs are a minority.
Yeah.
They're maybe like 5% of the entire gang population. But no, I don't get to meet that many, and the ones that I do meet, they're hesitant on doing interviews. And I think because, gangs is a male-dominated culture, and even though these guys are from the ghetto, the inner city, they come from poverty, there's still gender discrimination within the gang. There's still,
Wow.
It's still not, it's not like equal opportunity place for women, you know. So it's very difficult for me to get those stories out. Every time I meet a guy, I say, hey, do me one favor, introduce me to a girl from your neighborhood, because I want to tell their story. And they always say, I'm going to hook you up, but they rarely do.
So on the flip side of gangs, you know, and we talked about how you had said that, you know, most police officers or people in the department, you know, they say there's things that they'll do, but obviously there's more changes that should be made. When you were on the Tupac documentary, can you go over more of what you were talking about on that show?
Well, you know, I was actually hesitant to do that show. In fact, I think initially I turned it down, but I knew some of the producers that were working on the show. I worked with them before. There were some things that I didn't really want to talk about, and they respected it. So I would say that overall, I didn't get to say as much as I wanted to say, just because, you know, the homicide of any person is a very delicate subject.
Yeah.
And we're talking about the murder of Tupac Shakur, probably the most famous rapper to ever live. And a lot of the people that were involved in that homicide, some of those people are still living today. So that makes it even more tricky. Even though it happened over 20 years ago, it's still something that is, you gotta be careful what you say and how you say it.
Yeah.
So, I don't know, I didn't really wanna do it, but I did it anyways, you know, and they made it to where
you were satisfied.
Kinda, yeah, pretty much. They respected some of the ground rules that I laid down. And then there was another individual that I've been knowing for years that didn't want to participate on the show, and we left a lot of his stuff out, and I didn't want to talk about that person. So they respected it, but you know, I thought the show came out great. It was 6 episodes on A&E. They got some great interviews from people that have never done interviews before, including your boy, Lil Half Dead.
My boy, yeah, shout out to Little Half Dead.
I don't think Little Half Dead has ever spoke about that on camera before.
No.
So that made it interesting. And there was a few other people that had really never spoke on the issue. We never really seen an interview with Sharitha Wright, who was Suge Knight's ex-wife, and she spoke. They also got Reggie Wright Jr., who was the head of security.
Yes.
He did an interview, and you know, one of the theories actually points to him.
Compton's or police chief's son, right?
Well, his father wasn't the chief, but his father was one of the sheriff, and he became a sheriff as well. So it was kind of like a father-son duo as sheriff. But then the son, he ended up quitting this department. I think he had a disability leave, and then he became the head of Suge Knight's security. But one of the theories actually points to him as being responsible for the homicide. That's just one theory. So that's why I was surprised. They got an interview with him, but he cut the interview off after a few questions because I guess it was
got a little too close.
Yeah.
A little too close for comfort.
Yeah. So
you know, when I speak about that Tupac documentary, everybody's like, "Oh, another one. There's another documentary."
Yeah.
But if you are thinking that, don't doubt that until you watch it for yourself. Again, it is 6 episodes. I am a huge Tupac fan. I don't think there's any person on this planet that isn't a Tupac fan. He was brilliant. He was super smart, talented. You know, it's a tragedy what happened to him. But that documentary, it was just mind-blowing.
Yeah, I thought they did a job to make the documentary stand out from the rest of the previously shot documentaries.
Exactly. They went where no one has ever gone.
Yeah, and they even talked about the gun that was used in the homicide, which no other film had ever talked about. You know, how the gun had been found, and that was the murder weapon that killed Pac, and they found the gun in Compton, you know. So a lot of interesting things in that 6-episode documentary. I recommend everybody go check it out. Watch it, you know.
Yeah, you'll see this guy on there.
Alonso. I'm only on 3 episodes. I think. I think
only half of them.
1, 2, and 4, or 1, 2, and 5.
Yes, and it's still on their website, so it's free. Just go check it out. It's online. But yeah, I thought that was a really great documentary that they did. You know, obviously his murder will never be solved because it hasn't been. And if you watch the documentary, you'll see why there's so many roadblocks and all the theories, because of people that are inside and know information, and they're not necessarily going to do their part to help solve anything because it's in the best interest of them and not in the best interest of Tupac. And that's the other thing I kind of wanted to talk to you about too.
Mm-hmm.
Is speaking of, you know, the involvement of the city, you know, the police department, in putting their own roadblocks on justice, as you could say. Do you think that, I don't know how to word this, but do you have any personal experience with like police departments being crooked?
Absolutely. I have firsthand experience as a teenager growing up in Los Angeles. I've been arrested for things that I had nothing to do with. Mm-hmm. I was actually assaulted once by maybe 6 or 7 officers during the time Rodney King was assaulted. Rodney King was assaulted in 91. I was severely assaulted in 1990 by law enforcement when I was 19 years old. And, you know, it left a bitter taste in my mouth. You know, I'm more mature now, and, you know, sometimes I gotta look at both sides of it. Sometimes I was a little uncooperative, a little frustrated, but nevertheless, law enforcement has done things that they should have never done. Yeah. You know, I was dragged to the police station as a teenager to be questioned on things that you shouldn't speak on, and that's one of the tactics. They still do it to this day. They'll arrest you. Maybe they know you didn't have anything to do with it, but what do they want you to do? They want you to snitch on the person that did it. If something happened in front of your house or happened in your neighborhood, they'll drag you down there and you know, at least in the late 80s, early 90s, they would beat you up in an interrogation room in LAPD, whether it was the Wilshire Division, Southwest Division. I don't think that happens so much now. You know, this is under Chief Daryl Gates, and he was a very aggressive chief. He didn't really care about civil rights. He didn't really care about the community. So I don't want to say that that's representative of the LAPD today. Mm-hmm. You know, under Charlie Beck, it's a different department, but these problems still happen. We just had 18 sheriff's deputies, LA sheriff's deputies, that were indicted a couple years ago for corruption in the LA County Jail. So it still happens. It's probably not as prevalent, but it still happens.
Yeah, man. Well, hopefully we can educate people, and thank you for speaking on that. You know, I have had my own experiences as well, which I think just throws a huge red flag out there that it does happen more often than it's spoken about. And hopefully that we'll have better individuals that decide to join the police force, because obviously they are needed. You know, of course, we need, you know, some sort of law enforcement, but, you know, hopefully we'll get some better individuals that have integrity.
I hope so, but, you know, I'm not as optimistic as you are. Law enforcement are still going to shoot unarmed people. I mean, that hasn't changed in like 40 years. Mm-hmm.
I have a personal experience on that too.
In Long Beach?
No.
Okay. In
Arizona, which I will never ever live in Arizona. My family, I do have family members that do live there, but yeah, I have personal experience with brutality, basically, and it's really hard to even fight against anything that happens that they're behind. You know? There's not really anything we can do, actually.
Government has grown too large, too strong, and it's too powerful. And law enforcement it's not just a problem in LA or Southern California. The culture of policing is problematic all across America. So you can't change one department or expect one department to change and think that the whole culture is going to improve. It has to come from like the federal government. It has to come from the top, which I don't ever really foresee happening.
Yeah, like you said, it's not really their priority.
No.
You know, they're not putting the funding behind that. Did you get a chance to talk to Ben Crump, the guy that hosted the Tupac documentary?
Absolutely.
Civil rights
Yeah,
lawyer.
yeah.
So he was a lawyer for Trayvon Martin.
And Michael Brown in St. Louis.
That's amazing.
Yeah, he's got a few shows out right now, and I had a chance to get to know him well. We did a few interviews together, and he's all around great guy.
Yeah, I did reach out to him also, just from my own personal experience, but I don't know, where is he based out of?
He's originally from the South. I'm not sure where he's based out of, but he's
in Florida or something.
The reason how he got on the Tupac show and became a host of that show is because he had a relationship with Tupac's mom. They're both from the same state. I believe it's, I may be wrong, Tennessee. They're both from the South, and their families know each other.
Wow.
So before Afeni Shakur passed, she had already wanted Benjamin Crump to do this show. So a lot of people think that Benjamin Crump just came in and is taking advantage of a dead man and is doing this story for exploitative purposes because the Tupac story is always going to generate ratings.
Right.
But what people don't know is that he actually knows the family.
Wow.
He knows Pac's family, and that's how he ended up doing the Tupac show.
Yeah, man, I didn't know that. It's just so sad that Tupac's not with us anymore.
I always ask myself, I wonder what Tupac would be doing. What kind of rapper would he be if he was alive? And also Biggie as well, who was shot and killed in LA just 6 months later. Because there's a lot of rappers from that period that are still around, and we're talking about rappers that are over 40 years old.
Yeah.
Like Jay-Z, like LL Cool J, like Busta Rhymes. Where would Tupac and Biggie be in this conversation, today?
Oh my goodness, I can't imagine. They for sure would be changing the world.
That it would be so interesting if they were still around. But it's just a crazy thing that both of them were murdered within 6 months of each other, which is like,
right.
It's almost unbelievable to think that.
Both unsolved.
Both unsolved. One in Vegas, one in LA.
How can you be the most famous person in the world and not have something that happened to you?
I know. Are there any other famous people out there that have been murdered and those murders are unsolved? I can't think of too many.
Well, one, it was not unsolved, but I don't think that the guy got justice, is Michael Jackson, because his lawyer or his doctor skated.
Yeah, okay. I'm talking about like someone that's murdered, like deliberately killed, deliberately murdered.
So Michael Jackson did ask him to drugs, so yes, I see your point.
Yeah, but we've had John Lennon. He was murdered. They caught that guy like immediately.
Right.
Ronald Reagan was shot. They caught him right there at the scene. There's like John F. Kennedy. I'm sorry, not John F. Kennedy. Robert F. Kennedy was killed. They grabbed him. Sirhan. JFK, they grabbed Lee Harvey Oswald, but they never grabbed anyone for Tupac or Biggie.
I know. Yeah.
Some people think that's deliberate.
Yes, I tend to think that.
That the investigation wasn't as aggressive as it could have been. How do you have a murder that happens in Vegas, a city with bright lights, and in the middle of the desert?
Fight night.
Yeah, in the desert. How do you don't catch them? I can think of a few ways you don't catch them. There are a few ways, and then the same thing with Biggie. I think Biggie's homicide's a little different because there's been allegations that the LAPD was linked to it. Mm-hmm. So if the LAPD has been linked to it, that means they control the investigation. And then when Russell Poole, who was the leading detective here in LA, was really digging, his bosses told him to stop. Why would you want to stop investigating a homicide that happened in your city? And unfortunately, Russell Poole died not too long ago, but he was trying to crack the case. And it's just so many crazy things associated with Biggie's homicide and Pac's. It's
really unbelievable, and it's almost like, how is that even a reality?
That's why I'm a little hesitant to really dive in and talk about it. But maybe one day I will, because I know a whole lot about it. I know a whole lot about both of those homicides.
I know, and I would love to hear that, and like I said, that's why I was so intrigued by the A&E documentary, because I think that they really did touch on some concepts and theories that, do have truths inside of them. They didn't give the whole story, but they did give a lot of good information that you can put some things together.
Definitely. Well, one thing that I'm working on that I didn't mention is the story of a guy named Craig Munson.
Okay.
Craig Munson is one of the first well-known street gangsters in Los Angeles, and he predates the Crip period. In fact, the guy who started the Crips, a fellow named Raymond Washington, wanted to be in Craig Munson's gang.
Wow.
And Craig Munson actually ended up kicking him out of the gang.
Such a small city.
And
it's a big, small city.
And that's how the Crips were born, because Craig Munson kicked this guy, Raymond Washington, out of his gang. And so I'm working on his biography right now, and I'm hoping that we could, develop his story into other things.
So would you ever write a book about all the things that you know?
Well, right now I'm writing the book about Craig Munson, but maybe one day in the future I will. One book that's on my list to complete is about the criminal justice system and the way gang members are prosecuted, because most people don't really know, what it's like to be in a courtroom and how a gang member is prosecuted. So many little shady things happen, the way the prosecutors develop their cases and the way police officers testify on the stand under oath, all of that. So I really want to write something about all the cases that I've worked on.
Wow. Have you started writing on that at all?
No, but what I've done is I've taken all the transcripts to all my cases, I scanned them, and I'm collecting all of the data. Basically all the testimony from cops, all the testimony from witnesses, and we're talking about a couple of hundred cases, and all of them are gang-related cases. Most of them took place here in LA County, but there is a method that the prosecutor used, the method that the state uses, and a lot of people don't know about how shady it can get in a courtroom, and it almost borderlines on perjury, because it's all about convicting that guy at the table, and it's usually a black or brown kid.
Right.
And not only is it about convicting him, but it's about maxing him out. How many years can they give him? And right now the sentences are like 80 years, 90 years. It is. It's ridiculous. How do you give an 18-year-old kid 120 years in prison?
When you're 18, your brain isn't even fully developed, and I don't say that as an excuse or try and let anyone off just because they're young. But honestly, like, you haven't even given a chance to really know right from wrong. I mean, I think throwing the book at 18-year-olds is it's so sad. I
agree. What does giving 120 years to a teenager even do? It almost makes no sense, right? It's almost like we're in some sort of fascist Nazi country where we're sentencing, 18, 19, and 20-year-old kids to 100 years in prison, knowing you're not even going to live that long. So what's the whole purpose of that? And it's just the system that we're in right now. And hopefully if I write this effectively, because whenever you do research, you got to think about public policy. You want to have an influence on public policy. So hopefully one day the policymakers will wake up and say, this doesn't make sense. In fact, they're starting to say that about gang injunctions. We didn't even talk about gang injunctions, but right now the city of LA is starting to move away from gang injunctions. I don't think we're going to see any more gang injunctions in place, but they've been doing them for over 20 years. And I've been complaining about them since day one. And now it seems like the policymakers are starting to agree as well.
So does that mean what does that mean exactly? What is a gang injunction?
A gang injunction is when the city attorney sues you in civil court. Well, sues the gang. It sues the whole gang, and it restricts them, it restricts them from socializing in public and basically doing a lot of already legal activities. And I don't know what the goal is. They say the goal is to get rid of the gang, which it never does. And the goal is to reduce the crime of the gang, which it hasn't been linked to. But I believe that it's linked to urban development process of gentrification. In order to get your urban developers to invest millions of dollars into the Baldwin Village or millions of dollars into downtown LA, they're concerned about the gangs because they've believed the hype. So the city decides, okay, don't worry about the gangs. We'll take care of the gangs and you take care of the investment. So that's where the whole
gentrification, gang injunction relationship stems from. You see this in Echo Park. You see this in Venice. And other people have actually written about that. They definitely see the link between urban development, gentrification, and gang injunctions. So, but maybe the city is going to step away from that, but other cities are doing it. So it still exists in other cities around LA County and California. But yeah, you got to think about public policy whenever you're writing, whenever you research, whenever you're doing a book. How can you influence or change public policy?
Yes, and that just reminds me of Martin Luther King. We just posted a quote that he said on Monday, and it goes something like, a true leader isn't a searcher for consensus, they're a molder of consensus. I might have misquoted it a little bit, but what he meant was like a real leader helps to influence, not to say something for approval. So we definitely would like some influencing. I'm thankful that you're doing, your research and your part. I think there's so much that can happen, and I am an optimist. I like to see the good in people, and obviously you do, because you're, helping people that are stuck or have limited options, like you said. And hopefully you will start changing lives.
Hopefully. I'm not too optimistic about the government, though, about law enforcement shooting unarmed people.
Oh, God. And that would be a part two, because I said, I do have a family member that was actually taken, and when I say taken, killed by police enforcement. And it's still like real. It's so real,
Absolutely.
And
I recorded it once. I actually captured one.
You did?
On video, yeah. And it became the center of a civil rights trial. $15 million case in Los Angeles from a video that I captured of a guy unarmed getting shot by the LAPD.
And let me guess, the LAPD still walked away from that.
Well, there were no criminal charges. Well, a civil case is different, meaning the officers aren't going to get in trouble. So, and it never became a criminal matter, it just became a civil matter. And they were suing the police on behalf of the family. And the police won. They won that one. They win most of them. So, it's pretty hard. People just give the police the benefit of the doubt most of the time.
Wow. Well, keep checking his website, streetgangs.com. And, I'm sure we'll get more information from you in any new video that you put out. How often did you say that you put videos out?
I upload at least once a week, but I'd like to upload, 2 or 3 times a week.
And those are just all you going out, getting new interviews?
Absolutely. New interviews every week. Meeting new guys. Meeting them on social media is easy, so It's not that hard to find the next person to talk to.
Have you ever felt in danger?
Only one time. One time? Yeah, just one time. A guy pulled a gun out on me.
Oh my God.
Because he didn't know who I was. So, but 99.9% of the time, nothing ever happens. There's not a big issue, and it goes smooth. So it's not even as dangerous as people might think.
Wow. Well, we'd love for you guys to comment and tell us if you guys, whatever city you're in, what you feel, how you feel about, the unsolved murder of Tupac, about criminal reform in your city. And if you're a great person or a good person with integrity, maybe try and help change the laws and become a police officer and become a good one. Well, thank you so much for being on our show today. I hope you guys learned a lot about what's going on, and he's one of our first guests, so you are going to be seeing such great content from him, and be sure to find him online.
They can just go to streetgangs.com and you'll find everything that needs to be found about me. Streetgangs.com.
They can also go enroll in Cal State and take your class.
If you're at Cal State Long Beach, well, I already got a full load of students. Yeah, I can't add everyone, unfortunately.
Next semester.
Yeah, next semester.
Well, thank you guys. It's been a pleasure and so much fun. And tune into the next one.
Thank you.
Thanks, Alex.
It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. Cue the music. Just kidding.